Liam Carter, 26, strode into the Travis County courtroom with a chilling arrogance, smirking as he saw the family of the woman he brutally murdered, Emily Foster. Confident that his calm demeanor and cold smile would set him apart, he treated the trial like a performance where he still held control. But the most decisive evidence didn't come from an expert or a police officer. It came from the trembling voice recorded 2 weeks before Emily's death, words that made his smile vanish forever. Before diving into the story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell to stay updated on the latest cases. On the evening of September 17, 2010, the late summer heat enveloped the quiet streets of South Austin, Texas. The air was heavy with the scent of dry earth and gasoline, weaving through the still oak trees under the dim glow of yellow streetlights. In the South Congress View neighborhood, each apartment stood like a small fortress of routine and warmth, closing out an ordinary day, unaware of the darkness creeping closer. Inside a modest second-floor apartment at the end of the hallway, Emily Foster, 24, a nurse intern at St. David's Hospital, was preparing for the final night of her life. The smell of a late dinner lingered, mingling with the scent of wine and an unzipped suitcase. She was a woman of quiet habits and simple joys, someone who believed kindness could heal any crack in a person's soul. But in that apartment, under the dim glow of the kitchen light, Emily had no idea her trust was about to be betrayed in a cruel and senseless way. The peace of the complex was an illusion, a fragile veneer over the darkness, seeping through every door crack. Emily had lived there for over a year, loved by neighbors for her gentle smile and readiness to help anyone in need. That night, the only sounds were the slow hum of the ceiling fan and the fading rumble of cars on Riverside Drive. A quiet symphony that gave no hint of the violence about to erupt. The attack wasn't the result of rage or a robbery gone wrong. It was an intrusion of pure malice, disguised under the mask of love, a brutal act that would later make investigators admit there was no reason except control. The first official record of the tragedy was logged at 11:07 p.m. as a brief 911 call. The woman's voice on the recording trembled, choked with panic. "I think someone's screaming upstairs. Please, hurry." The dispatcher only caught a few muffled screams before the line went dead. A chilling 3-second silence followed, long enough for the operator to know something horrific had happened. An emergency order was issued immediately. 2 patrol cars raced to South Congress View Apartments. 9 minutes later, red and blue lights tore through the Austin night. The first officers climbed the second-floor stairs, guns drawn. When they breached apartment 2B at 11:18 p.m., the door swung open with a dry creak, and the sharp metallic smell of blood hit them instantly. It mixed with the scent of wine and the stale heat of an old air conditioner, creating a thick, oppressive atmosphere. The living room TV was still on, its flickering light casting eerie shadows on the walls. On the dining table, 2 wine glasses remained, one empty, the other half full. Next to them was an unwashed plate, a napkin crumpled on the chair. The apartment was eerily tidy, with no signs of a prolonged struggle. Everything was in place, except Emily Foster, lying motionless on the kitchen floor. She lay on her side, her brown hair matted with blood, her hand still clutching half of a shattered phone. Its cracked screen glowed faintly, casting a weak blue light on her pale face. The scene was both still and horrifying. The door was unlocked. No signs of forced entry, no broken windows, no missing belongings. Emily's wallet, watch, and purse sat untouched on the table. The officers quietly noted every detail. One observed that a kitchen knife was missing from the rack. In the corner, a toppled chair bore a long skid mark on the tile floor, a trace of a desperate moment of resistance. Police immediately sealed off the area. Under the flashing red and blue lights, neighbors gathered in the courtyard below, wrapped in thin blankets against the night breeze. No one spoke much, they just stared at the door of apartment 2B, where the yellow police line "Do Not Cross" tape now separated the world of the living from the dead. Meanwhile, across town, Karen Foster, Emily's mother, was working the night shift at St. David's Hospital. When the call came, she was reviewing patient charts. The officer's voice on the phone was calm but heavy. "Ma'am, we need you to come in. It's about your daughter," she asked twice, unable to believe her ears. Then everything went dark. A colleague caught her as she collapsed, papers scattering across the floor. By 2 a.m., Karen was at the Travis County Police Department. In the waiting room, she sat still, clutching a locket with her daughter's picture. When a young officer handed her the identification form, she didn't cry. She only whispered, "It's her, my Emily." The next morning, the news spread across Austin. The first KXAN broadcast opened with a ticker. Young nurse found dead in South Congress apartment. Footage showed apartment 2B, framed by crisscrossing yellow tape. A female reporter stood in the early sunlight, delivering a steady report. Police say there were no signs of forced entry, raising the chilling possibility that the victim knew her killer. The Austin American-Statesman's morning edition ran a similar headline, paired with a photo of Emily in her nurse's uniform, smiling warmly. The caption read, "Loved by her patients, taken too soon." By afternoon, residents of South Congress had set up a small memorial outside the building. Candles, daisies, and handwritten notes piled up. A young woman, Emily's shift partner, whispered as she placed a photo on the table. She just wanted to leave him. That's all. Neighbors began recounting what they'd heard. Linda Perry, the 911 caller, was still shaken. "They fought a lot, but I thought it was just another argument. He always sounded angry. She always sounded scared." Another added, "He loved to win. Even in fights, he had to win." That evening, under the flickering candlelight and the scent of melting wax in the breeze, dozens stood silently on the paved walkway. No one said much. A TV reporter delivered a somber live report. A community shaken by the loss of a young nurse, a woman killed, as police believe, by someone she trusted. The final shot of the broadcast showed the police tape still up, and in the second-floor window, the light in apartment 2B still glowed, a pale yellow flicker, refusing to fade. Police left the scene at dawn, carrying sealed evidence bags, a bloodied kitchen knife recovered from the dumpster behind the building, the broken phone, and the 2 wine glasses. Small details, seemingly insignificant, but soon to form a complete picture, a picture of a night when Austin lost its peace. The morning after the murder, sunlight spilled across the South Congress View parking lot. The yellow police line, "Do not cross" tape still hung, swaying lightly in the breeze. The curious crowd had dispersed, leaving only a few officers wrapping up, jotting down the final fragments of a bloody night. The air still carried the scent of bleach and rust. Detective Mark Dillard arrived at 7 a.m. He was no stranger to homicides, but something about this apartment felt different. The cold tidiness, the emotionless stillness, as if the killer didn't just take a life, but wanted to erase all traces of it. He stood at the kitchen door, eyes fixed on the scrubbed tiles. Everything was unnaturally clean. The knife rack was missing one large kitchen blade, its empty slot glaringly obvious. Dillard gloved up and crouched by the fridge. Sunlight from the window caught a faint, thread-like smear dried blood overlooked. Nearby, under the table, he spotted a faint men's shoe print on the tile. Not a running shoe, but a work boot, its rubber sole worn at the heel. He signaled a technician to photograph it, then stepped back, eyes scanning the scene. "Knife's cleaned, but the floor still has wipe marks," the technician said quietly. The killer was calm, not rushed, wiped multiple times, used a wet cloth, but missed the mark under the table. Dillard nodded. Whoever did this had time, and knew her. In the living room, the forensics team accessed Emily's shattered phone. A technician plugged in a data recovery device, and the screen flickered to life. Within minutes, text messages began to appear. Dillard read through his glasses. Dozens of messages, nearly all from one person, Liam Carter, sent in rapid succession, sometimes minutes apart. The tone shifted from pleading to angry to outright threatening. "You think you can just leave? You're mine, Emily. Don't forget that. If you walk out that door, I'll make sure you never walk away again." Dillard paused at the last message, frowning. He'd seen this type before, Men who mistook love for ownership. A kind of criminal who didn't kill out of hatred, but out of refusal to lose control. He flipped open his notebook, scribbling 3 words in pencil. Possession killing, not love, control. Outside in the hallway, the building's security footage was reviewed. Dillard sat with the tech team in the surveillance room, the dim monitor light reflecting off his face. The footage was grainy but clear. At 10:42 p.m., a man in a dark jacket entered the elevator, holding a small paper bag. The elevator stopped at the 2nd floor. Emily's apartment was just to the right. At 11:03 p.m., the same man exited, the bag gone. He looked directly at the camera, his expression eerily calm, then walked out of frame. "Any facial recognition?" Dillard asked. "Low resolution, but we can cross-check. We'll send it to the DMV." He nodded slightly. "Good. And see if there's anything notable about that bag." As the forensics team left, the apartment was nearly empty, save for a few investigators. Dillard stood alone at the kitchen window. Outside, the sun was up, shining through the frosted glass, casting faint light on the tiles where blood had been wiped clean. He pictured Emily from her file photos, a young woman with kind eyes and a gentle smile. He recalled the dining table scene, 2 wine glasses, an unfinished meal, a woman who believed she could leave in peace, and a man who couldn't accept it. Everything in the room told the same story: when love becomes power and control becomes a weapon. His phone buzzed. It was the preliminary coroner's report. DNA from the blood matched the victim. Male fingerprints were found on the 2nd wine glass. No foreign objects or third-party DNA in the apartment. Dillard stared out the window, exhaling slowly, his voice low, almost a whisper. He came here to end it, not to argue. A colleague asked. "Think he knew the camera caught him?" "Maybe," Dillard replied. "But guys like him don't think they'll get caught. They think they're right." He added one last line to his notebook. "She tried to leave, and so she died." Leaving the apartment, Dillard walked slowly down the long hallway. Morning light streamed through the frosted glass, casting pale golden streaks on the tiles. With each step, he heard the echo of those text messages in his mind. "You're mine. You'll never walk away again." Outside, the complex had returned to its false daily calm. A few residents headed to work, avoiding the police's gaze. In the distance, a patrol car radio crackled. Possible suspect identified. Name: Liam Carter. Dillard closed his notebook, his expression cold. He knew that name would haunt Austin for months to come, and he knew the game of a man obsessed with control had just ended. The next morning, Austin woke to the September heat, sunlight cutting through the thin fog over the South Congress View parking lot. Across town, in a small garage off Riverside Drive, Liam Carter was hunched under a pickup truck, hands smeared with motor oil, an unlit cigarette in his mouth. The distant wail of police sirens grew louder, sharp and dry, a sound he barely acknowledged. As 2 officers appeared at the garage door, Liam slid out, wiping his hands on a rag, squinting into the sunlight. His face was slick with sweat, but his eyes remained calm. "Liam Carter?" the officer asked, voice firm. He smirked, looking up at the 3 men before him, 2 with hands on their holsters. "Guess you found me fast," he said, his tone light, almost praising their efficiency. The police read the arrest warrant for first-degree murder. Liam extended his hands before they asked, his oil-stained wrists snapping into gleaming steel cuffs. As he was let out, he glanced back at the garage, his lips curling into an unreadable smile. The garage owner, a middle-aged man, stood frozen, face pale. God, he was just here working like nothing happened. At the Travis County Police Department, the interrogation room was cold and stark, like a surgical blade. A metal table, 2 chairs, white-painted walls, and a fluorescent light reflecting off a one-way mirror. Liam sat upright, hands cuffed in front, relaxed, as if at a job interview. He scanned the room, then grinned at the corner camera. Detective Mark Dillard entered, holding a thin file. He pulled up a chair, set the papers down, his eyes cold and weary. For the first few seconds, neither spoke. Only the hum of the air conditioner and the faint roll of a pen on the table broke the silence. "Liam," Dillard began, voice low and even. "You know why you're here, right?" He nodded, eyes locked on Dillard. "Yeah. You think I killed her." "Not think," Dillard said. "We have enough evidence." Liam chuckled softly, tilting his head. "Then why ask?" Dillard didn't respond. He flipped open the file, placing a crime scene photo in front of him. Emily on the tile floor, hair soaked in blood. The cold light reflected in Liam's eyes, but no emotion crossed his face, only an unsettling indifference. "She pushed me too far," he said after a pause, his voice flat, like he was talking about fixing a car. "She said things she shouldn't have." "Were you going to leave?" Dillard asked. "Leave? No, she was leaving. I just made her stop." Dillard stared at him. "By killing her?" Liam shrugged. "She wouldn't listen. You don't understand what that's like, when someone thinks they can just walk away like you don't matter." Dillard stayed silent. He'd learned that in interrogations like this, silence was more effective than any accusation. And it worked. Within minutes, Liam started talking, as if the silence itself was an invitation. He recounted everything with chilling detail, how he arrived at the apartment at 10:40 p.m., knocked, then used an old key when Emily didn't answer, how they argued, how he grabbed the knife from the kitchen rack and just wanted to scare her. When Dillard asked, "How many stab wounds, Liam?" he glanced at the ceiling, as if trying to recall. 12, maybe 13. "I didn't count." "Did she beg you to stop?" Liam met Dillard's eyes, a thin smile forming. "She screamed. Then she stopped. I knew it was over." Dillard gripped his pen tightly, but said nothing. He glanced at the one-way mirror, where another officer watched. The room sank into a heavy silence. "Liam," Dillard said softly, "do you feel any remorse?" He tilted his head, his expression as casual, as if discussing the weather. "Do you feel sorry for her?" The smile returned, slow and cruel. "She should have stayed," he said, almost whispering. "It's that simple." Dillard sat a moment longer, his gaze fixed on the unrepentant face before him. Then he closed the file, stood, and pushed the chair in. "Thanks for cooperating, Liam," he said, voice dry. As he turned, Liam laughed. A wider grin, teeth glinting under the cold light. "You're welcome, Detective." Dillard stepped out, closing the door. In the hallway, noon light streamed through a small window, catching his hardened face. He paused before a waiting colleague, removed his glasses, and said in a low, heavy voice, "He's not angry, he's proud." Inside the room, through the thick glass, Liam sat unmoved, head slightly tilted, his smile intact, a smile of a man who believed he'd just won another round in a game he'd set the rules for. The coroner's report arrived at the Travis County Police Department 3 days later. A thick, blue-bound document stamped with the Texas coroner's seal. Detective Mark Dillard opened it in the Monday morning briefing room, reading each line with a heavy expression. The autopsy revealed Emily Foster had been stabbed 12 times, 3 of which were fatal, severing her aorta. Estimated time of death was around 10:55 p.m., nearly matching the moment Liam Carter was caught on camera leaving the building. No scratches, bruises, or defensive wounds were found on the victim. The coroner concluded the victim did not resist, likely ambushed or subdued before death. The details silenced the room. Dillard closed the file and looked at the evidence officer. "What do we have on the weapon?" The officer presented a sealed plastic bag containing a black-handled kitchen knife, its 8-inch steel blade stained with dried blood. "Found in the dumpster behind the building, wrapped in newspaper," he said. "Fingerprints match Carter." Dillard nodded, glancing at a receipt clipped to the file. "Where's this from?" "Exxon gas station on Riverside. Security footage shows Carter buying the knife and a water bottle at 9:15 p.m. less than 2 hours before the murder." The pieces fell into place. The weapon, the timeline, the killer, everything aligned with ruthless precision. No impulsiveness, no argument spiraling into violence. This was a calculated act, planned to the minute. Dillard tucked his pen into his pocket, leaning back in his chair. "No room for doubt," he said softly. "This is murder 1, deliberate and premeditated." That same day, the case was sent to the Travis County District Attorney's Office, where prosecutor Rachel Monroe took over. In her mid-40s, with short brown hair and a steely gaze, she'd handled dozens of murder cases, but few unsettled her from the first glance like this one. On her desk, Rachel spread out the photos, the crime scene, Emily alive in her nurse's uniform, the security camera stills, and the knife purchase receipt. At the center, she placed a photo from the interrogation, Liam Carter smiling at the camera. Smiling after killing, she said evenly. Smiling when arrested, smiling while confessing. Her colleague, Assistant DA Ben Harland, spoke up. The public's fired up. The press wants to know when we'll charge him. If we don't go public soon, they'll spin their own story. Rachel stayed silent, flipping through the file again. Every detail fit too perfectly for a crime of passion. Not love, she said. Power. He wanted control until the very end. She tapped her pen on the desk 3 times, then signed the prosecution request. The charge was clear. State of Texas v. Liam Carter, first-degree murder. The media caught wind hours later. A hasty press conference was held in the DA's large briefing room. Rachel stepped to the podium, file in hand, as camera flashes popped. Today, she said, the Travis County District Attorney's Office formally charges Liam Carter with first-degree murder, supported by definitive evidence and a motive rooted in possession, not self-defense or anger. This was a meticulously planned act and will be tried publicly. Behind her, a screen displayed Liam being led away, young, eyes vacant, a faint mocking smile. A reporter shouted, "Is it true he showed no remorse?" Rachel looked up, voice steady. He smiled when he was arrested. He smiled when he talked about killing her. That's all you need to know. Emily Foster's family was notified that day. Karen arrived at the DA's office, clutching a framed photo of her daughter. When Rachel asked if she wanted a closed trial to shield them from further media pain, she shook her head. No, she said, eyes red but voice firm. He smiled when she died. Let the world see that smile. Her words made the front page of the Austin American-Statesman the next morning. Headlines screamed, "The smiling killer of Austin's to face first-degree murder charge." On TV, evening news broadcasts aired footage of Liam in an orange jumpsuit, wrists cuffed, head tilted, half smiling. A commentator noted, "A face that shows no remorse, only satisfaction." The story quickly went beyond local news. National outlets like CNN and NBC reported, Texas mechanic charged with premeditated murder of girlfriend. Online forums exploded with outrage. Some wrote, "He thinks he's famous now." Others replied, "Then let the trial make him infamous forever." That afternoon, in his office, Dillard watched a news rerun on a small screen. He said nothing, just stared at Liam's face on the TV, a face that turned a crime into a game. On his desk, the file was stamped "Case File Complete." Beneath his final notes, one line stood out, written in bold, deliberate strokes. He planned it. He owned it. He enjoyed it. As he turned off the TV, Dillard gazed out the window at the blazing Texas sunset, reflecting on the glass. A long day was over, but for him and Prosecutor Monroe, it was just the start of a battle to turn the killer's smile into the final proof of his guilt. 1 week after the press conference, the Travis County District Attorney's Office was steeped in the tense atmosphere of preparation. The third-floor hallway was bathed in fluorescent light, filled with the smell of coffee and freshly printed documents. Rachel Monroe sat in her office, facing a large whiteboard covered with notes, diagrams, and red arrows connecting timelines. Every detail, every minute, was arranged into an undeniable sequence. Beside her, Detective Mark Dillard leaned against the desk, arms crossed. He had seen many cases, but Rachel's methodical approach made him feel like he was watching a surgeon dissect a body with precision. She overlooked nothing. Every piece of evidence, every text message, every last breath of Emily's was woven together to tell a story. A crime of control, not love. "We start at 9:15 p.m., Rachel said, pointing to the first line on the board. The receipt from the Exxon gas station. Liam Carter buys the kitchen knife and a bottle of water. She moved to the next marker, 10:42. Security footage catches him entering the South Congress View building. 10:55. the coroner's estimated time of death. 11:03, the camera shows him leaving. 11:20, police receive the 911 call, and by midnight, he's back at the garage, wiping his hands, working as if nothing happened. Dillard nodded. He was calm the whole next morning. He thought not fleeing would keep suspicion off him. Guys like that always think they're smarter than the system. Rachel wrote another line in red marker. Deliberate, controlled, proud. She paused, looking at Dillard. We need to make the jury understand. This wasn't a fit of rage. This was a choice. They began assembling witnesses. First was Linda Perry, the downstairs neighbor who called 911. She recounted in her statement, hearing Emily scream, "Liam, please stop," followed by silence. The screech of metal and a heavy thud on the floor. Her voice trembled as she read it back, but she remained steadfast. I knew it wasn't just another fight. Next was Sarah Coleman, Emily's best friend, who knew the details of her relationship with Liam. Sarah provided police with messages Emily sent in her final weeks. He waits outside my work sometimes. He says he'll never let me go. In one email, Emily wrote, I'm afraid of what he'll do when I leave. Rachel read each word, her hand tightening. She knew this was coming, she said, her voice dropping low. We need the jury to feel that fear. Beyond key witnesses, Dillard contacted Liam's co-workers at the garage, 3 men who worked the same night shift. They stated he arrived late, around 11:30, expressionless, washed his hands thoroughly, then sat down to eat a sandwich. When someone teased that he looked tired, Liam only said, "Long night." All statements, evidence and digital data were logged. Cameras, messages, receipts, coroner's reports. The scattered pieces of a crime were coming together into a complete picture. One afternoon, in a small meeting room, Rachel presented the strategy to a group of young prosecutors and the investigative team. On the projector, she opened the first slide, State of Texas Voth Liam Carter. Our strategy isn't based on emotion, she said. Her voice clear and sharp. Not because Emily was a good person, not because he smiled, but because every piece of evidence points to this being deliberate. He bought the knife. He chose the time. He came, killed, and cleaned up. Not a loss of control, but absolute control. An assistant asked, "How will you frame the motive?" Rachel turned to the board, writing 2 words in large letters, control and ownership. He didn't kill out of jealousy. He killed because he couldn't let someone else make a choice for him. We'll make that clear from start to finish. This is a crime of possession, not love. Dillard looked at her, nodding slightly. He killed her because he couldn't lose, Rachel replied, her gaze steady. Exactly. The next day, they met Karen Foster at her home. She lived in a small apartment with windows overlooking Town Lake. On her table sat a photo of Emily between 2 candles. When Rachel explained that they wanted her to testify, Karen stared silently at her teacup. You don't need to talk about the case details, Rachel said gently. Just tell them who Emily was. Let them know the kind of person she was. Karen looked up, her eyes red but resolute. I'll do it. I want to see him hear the verdict. Her response silenced the room. Rachel nodded, saying nothing more. In her file, she jotted a private note. Witness. Karen Foster, the voice of justice. That weekend, in an office lit late into the night, Rachel and Dillard reviewed the entire case file one last time. Outside, Austin drizzled lightly. The desk was covered with photos, charts, and reports, reflecting the glow of the lamp. Rachel sipped cold coffee, her voice low. Do you ever think he feels remorse? Dillard shook his head. No. Guys like him don't know remorse, only winning or losing, and this time, she replied, setting her pen down on the paper. He's going to lose. On the first page of the completed file, bold text read, State of Texas v. Liam Carter charge, first-degree murder. Lead prosecutor, Rachel Monroe. Investigating officer, Mark Dillard. Rachel closed the file, her hand gripping the edge. They both looked at the whiteboard on the wall, where, amid timelines and evidence, a single line was circled in red, written in bold pencil. He smiled when he killed her. Now he'll face the world without it. Outside, the rain pattered steadily on the glass, like a warning of the legal storm approaching. In the coming weeks, Austin would hear Liam Carter's name again, not as an ordinary mechanic, but as a symbol of evil cloaked in a smile. On the morning of April 21, 2011, the Travis County Courthouse was steeped in heavy anticipation. Austin's sky was unusually overcast, gray clouds blanketing the horizon like a thick curtain for a dark play about to begin. The courthouse hallway was packed with reporters, cameras, and curious onlookers jostling for space. Some carried printed newspapers with bold headlines. "The smiling killer goes to trial." The doors to Courtroom 3 opened, and Liam Carter stepped in amid a flurry of camera clicks. He wore a navy suit, gray tie, hair neatly combed. The harsh white of flashbulbs lit his face, younger than his age, composed and strangely, still smiling. As he was led to the defendant's table, he turned toward the press, nodding slightly, as if greeting his audience. At the prosecution table, Rachel Monroe looked up as he entered. She showed no reaction, only watched. She had seen many killers, but few relished the attention like this. She knew, in his mind, this wasn't a trial, it was a stage. Behind her, in the public seating, sat Karen Foster, Emily's mother, dressed in black, clutching her daughter's framed photo. When Liam glanced her way, her eyes didn't waver, while he merely tilted his head, a gesture both arrogant and chilling, as if acknowledging, "I know you're there." At 9:05 a.m., Judge Harold Jenkins banged his gavel to open the trial. The sharp wooden sound cut through the murmurs in the courtroom. The 12-person jury was seated, 9 women, 3 men, faces stern, eyes focused. Both prosecution and defense were ready. Rachel Monroe stood first. She approached the podium, gently placed her file down, adjusted the microphone, and looked directly at the jury. Her voice was low, clear, unwavering. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this is not a story about love. It's about control and arrogance." The courtroom fell silent. Each word landed like a hammer on metal. Rachel continued, "The defendant, Liam Carter, didn't lose control. He exercised it. He bought a knife. He walked into her home. He killed her because she decided to leave. And after he ended her life, he smiled." She paused for a beat, then pointed at him, her voice lower but heavier. "That smile you see right now, that same smile he wore when he was arrested, is not a sign of regret. It's pride." Some jurors glanced at the defendant's table. As if on cue, Liam turned toward them, his thin, cold smile, sharp as a blade's edge. A woman in the jury flinched slightly, her eyes darting away. Rachel drew their attention back, her voice steady. "We will show you the timeline. We will show you the knife he bought, the messages he sent, the camera footage that captured his face as he walked away. But most of all, we will show you the truth, that Emily Foster died not because of love gone wrong, but because of one man's belief that he owned her." She closed her file, stepped back, her eyes briefly meeting Karen Foster's. Karen bowed her head, hands gripping tightly. Next, David Keene, the defense attorney, stood. A middle-aged man, with a soft voice and a knack for seeming likable. He took a deep breath, approached the podium, scanned the room, and spoke with calm sadness. "My client lost control, not his soul." His voice was gentle, almost mournful. "Liam Carter is not a monster. He is a young man who made a terrible, irreversible mistake in a moment of emotional collapse. He grew up in a broken home, without guidance, without love. On the night of the incident, he didn't plan a murder, he lost control." Keene looked at the jury, lowering his voice. "You will see evidence that he confessed. You will see that he didn't run, didn't hide, didn't lie, because deep down, he knows what he did was wrong. But knowing wrong does not mean being evil. We ask you to remember that difference." Rachel watched him speak, hands clasped, face expressionless. She knew this tactic, turning a deliberate crime into an emotional tragedy. But in this case, the only emotion present was the smugness of a killer. When Keene finished, he turned to Liam, signaling for remorse. But Liam only gave a faint smile, a shallow grin that stirred the room. A man in the public seating shook his head, muttering, "That kid doesn't even know he's doomed." Judge Jenkins banged his gavel for order. "This court will not tolerate disruptions. Mr. Keene, please remind your client to maintain appropriate decorum." Keene nodded, whispering to Liam, "Stop smiling, Liam." He shrugged, replying just loud enough for the microphone to catch, "I'm not smiling, I'm just not sorry." The words thickened the air in the room. Rachel met his gaze, her eyes like steel, his gleaming with defiance. The morning ended with the presentation of the witness list and an expected 3-week trial schedule. As the judge called a recess, Liam was escorted out. The moment the doors opened, dozens of cameras flashed. He turned back, his half-smile reappearing, as if signing his own guilt. Rachel lingered at the table, watching through the doorway. A reporter approached, asking quietly, "What do you think of him?" She answered without turning, "He thinks this is his stage." Then she glanced at the closing doors, where the police and defendant had disappeared, her voice dropping, almost to herself, "But it's his cage." The noise outside echoed in, reporters, cameras, shoes clacking on stone. Austin saw another sunny day, and Liam Carter's smile, the smile of a man who believed himself untouchable, graced every evening news broadcast. But for Rachel Monroe, the real battle had only begun. On the second day of the trial, the atmosphere in the Travis County Courthouse was thick as cigarette smoke. Outside, dozens of reporters lined up from early morning, waiting to get in. Inside, the jury was seated, their eyes tense. Liam Carter sat at the defendant's table, his suit crisp, hands clasped, face as calm as if he weren't facing a life sentence. Rachel Monroe stood, stepping to the center of the courtroom, her voice low and firm. "The state calls Linda Perry to the stand." An older woman, petite, walked slowly to the witness stand. Her hands trembled slightly as she swore to tell the truth. Rachel approached, her tone softening. "Mrs. Perry, you lived in the apartment below the victim, correct?" She nodded. "Yes, ma'am, apartment 1B. Emily lived right above me. On the night of September 17, 2010, what did you hear?" She took a deep breath, eyes fixed on her clasped hands. "At first, I heard arguing. It was like any other night, but then she screamed. It was different that time, louder, terrified. A brief silence. I heard her shout, 'Liam, please stop.' Then, something fell, a heavy sound, and then silence. The courtroom was still. Rachel let the final words hang in the air for a moment before continuing softly. "Did you call the police?" "Yes, I called 911 right away." "Thank you, Mrs. Perry." Rachel nodded, then turned to the jury. You heard the fear in her voice. You heard the silence that followed. She returned to her table, picking up the next set of documents. "The state calls Dr. Aaron Patel, forensic pathologist." A man in a white lab coat took the stand, his demeanor formal. Rachel let him introduce himself briefly before beginning. "Doctor, please tell the jury what your examination revealed." His voice was steady, professional. The victim sustained 12 stab wounds. 3 were fatal, 2 to the chest, 1 to the abdomen. The wounds were inflicted from above, consistent with an assailant standing over the victim. There were no defensive wounds on her hands or arms. "No signs of resistance?" Rachel asked, though she knew the answer. "None." The victim was likely subdued or frozen in fear. Rachel let him explain the knife's trajectory, blood patterns, and attack distance. Each detail was described clinically, but when photos were projected on the large screen, some jurors looked away. Only one person didn't flinch, Liam Carter. He tilted his head, his eyes cold and empty, lips twitching slightly, as if watching a rerun of an old movie. When the pathologist stepped down, Rachel signaled the IT technician. The room dimmed, leaving only the glow of the large screen. The first text appeared, recovered messages. Emily Foster's phone, an automated voice read aloud, cold and steady. "Where are you? You're ignoring me. Don't make me come there. You think you can walk away? Don't test me." Each message hit the room like an invisible stab. As the final one flashed, Rachel said softly, "That was the last message Emily ever received." The lights came back on, silence enveloping the room. In the public seating, Karen Foster bowed her head, hand covering her mouth, tears streaming. Rachel glanced at her, needing no words. Everyone in the room understood. Next was Sarah Coleman, Emily's best friend. Dressed in dark clothing, her blonde hair tied back, her face haggard from sleeplessness. When Rachel asked, her voice trembled. "Emily," she was scared. The last 2 weeks before she died, she couldn't sleep. She said he watched her from his car outside her work, that he kept saying, "If I can't have you, no one will." "Did you urge her to call the police?" Sarah nodded, eyes welling. She said she would, but she didn't want to make things worse. She kept saying, "He'll calm down." Rachel gave her a moment, then asked her final question. "When you heard she was gone, what was the first thing that came to your mind?" Sarah looked up, her voice breaking, that he finally did it, that he meant every word he said. The only sound in the silent courtroom was the scribbling of the court clerk's pen. In the afternoon, the prosecution presented physical evidence: the kitchen knife, the sealed trash bag, the gas station receipt. Rachel slowly recited the timeline, each detail chillingly precise. 9:15 p.m. Liam buys the knife. 10:42 p.m. Camera catches him entering the building. 10:55 p.m. Victim dies. 11:03 p.m. He leaves, composed. As she spoke, Liam sat still, leaning back, hands clasped. When the final image, Emily on the kitchen floor, was projected, he lowered his head and smiled faintly. The small gesture didn't escape the jury. A man in seat 4 frowned. A woman whispered to her neighbor. He smiled. Rachel saw it. She paused, staring directly at him. She let the silence stretch until every eye followed hers. Then, in a cold, controlled voice, she said clearly, "That smile tells you everything you need to know about guilt." He looked up, lips still curled, eyes defiant. Rachel withdrew her gaze, closed her file. "No further questions, Your Honor." The judge nodded, voice stern. "Court will recess for the day." The gavel's sharp crack ended the heavy first day of testimony. Outside, as the courtroom doors opened, reporters surged forward. They caught the moment Liam was led down the hall, his smile intact, unnervingly calm. That photo graced the evening news with the headline, "The Smile That Chilled Austin." In the DA's office, Rachel reviewed the trial footage. She paused the screen when Liam's faint smile appeared, as he lowered his head. Outside the window, Austin's sky burned red at sunset. Dillard entered, setting a coffee cup on the table. "He's enjoying this," he said. Rachel looked out, her voice low and hoarse. "I know, but tomorrow, I'll take that smile away." The third day of the trial opened under a strangely clear Austin sky. Sunlight filtered through the courthouse's high windows, glinting off the polished stone floor, as if trying to wash away the heavy air from the day before. But inside, no one felt relieved. Every statement, every photo, every bloodstain had built a wall of cold truth, leaving no room for sympathy. Then it was David Keene's turn, the defense attorney. He took a deep breath, stepped to the podium, and surveyed the courtroom. Before him sat the jury, faces weary, tense, but focused on every detail. Across the room, Liam Carter sat upright, hands clasped on the table, his expression unchanged, calm, with a faint smile just enough to send chills. Keene began slowly, his voice deliberately soft. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, you have heard the evidence, you have seen the photographs, and you have felt the weight of this tragedy. But today, I ask you to look beyond the horror and see the human being behind it." He paused, as if to carve out space for attention. "My client, Liam Carter, is not a monster. He is a man who lost control, not his soul." The words echoed in the quiet room, a rehearsed echo of the refrain Keene had used in dozens of cases before. He knew how to choose his words, to stir compassion, to plant doubt in the hearts of those poised to judge. "Liam grew up in a broken home," he continued. "A father who drank, a mother who left when he was just 9. He learned that love meant shouting and silence. He spent years in therapy trying to control what he called the noise inside his head." Keene moved slowly around the podium, light glinting off his glasses. "On that night when Emily said she was leaving, All those memories, all that pain came flooding back. It wasn't hatred, it was fear, fear of being left again. He placed a hand on the defendant's table, his voice lowering. He didn't plan to kill her. He didn't come there with murder in his heart. It was a moment of panic, of losing control, and in that moment, tragedy happened. A few people in the public seating exchanged glances. Someone shook their head slightly. Another looked down, avoiding Liam's gaze. But he didn't. Throughout the defense, Liam kept smiling. He held a pen, scribbling evenly on a sheet of paper, occasionally tilting his head, his eyes scanning the courtroom as if gauging the audience's reaction to his performance. Keene pressed on, clinging to the last weak point he could leverage. The prosecution wants you to believe this was premeditated. But consider this, there was no disguise, no escape plan, no attempt to flee. He stayed. He confessed. These are not the actions of a cold-blooded killer. They are the desperate mistakes of a broken man. Each word was emphasized, drawn out. His voice grew hoarse with the effort to evoke emotion. But across the table, Rachel Monroe sat unmoved, her gaze cold and focused. When Keene paused to breathe, she stood slowly, holding a single thin sheet of paper. Permission to respond, Your Honor. The judge nodded. Proceed, Miss Monroe. Rachel stepped forward, her movements so calm they seemed to freeze the room. She stopped a few meters from Liam, her voice low, but each word sharp as a blade. He planned, he purchased, he executed. 3 short sentences, 3 clean cuts into the silence. The room stilled. Rachel didn't break eye contact with the jury. At 9:15, he bought a knife. Not a kitchen utensil, a weapon. At 10:42, he entered her apartment. At 10:55, he killed her. Then he cleaned the knife, walked out, and went to work. She turned, pointing at Liam. This is not a man who lost control. This is a man who wanted control, and took it by force. Liam looked up, his eyes meeting hers. In that brief moment, he smiled, almost triumphantly. Rachel didn't flinch. She only said softly, her voice icy, "That smile, that's not regret. That's pride." Keene frowned, trying to interject. Objection. Overruled. Judge Jenkins cut in. The jury will disregard the last remark, but the point stands. The jury scribbled furiously. A woman in the front row bowed her head, her hand trembling as she held her pen. Rachel stepped back to the prosecution table, her gaze still on Liam. She didn't need to say more. Everyone had seen, he wasn't listening to his own defense, he was savoring it. Keene tried to salvage his case, his voice softer, weaker. Liam is capable of rehabilitation. He's young, he can still. But his words drowned in the courtroom's murmurs. A reporter jotted quickly, "Defendant smirks as lawyer pleads for mercy." The judge signaled the end of the defense's argument. As Keene sat down, sweat beaded on his forehead. He turned to Liam, whispering, "You didn't help yourself." Liam only shrugged, then leaned down to write a few more lines. When Dillard, seated in the back, leaned forward to look, he saw the scrawled words on the paper. "They're all watching." Finally, the trial recessed. As police escorted Liam out, a reporter shouted, "Do you feel sorry, Liam?" He turned back, smiling faintly. For what? That response aired on the evening news, replayed dozens of times as a mark of smug evil. In the DA's office, Rachel watched the clip on her screen. Dillard stood beside her, silent. When the video ended, she said only one thing, soft but certain, "Tomorrow we stop letting him perform." She closed her file, her gaze drifting to the window where Austin glowed red in the sunset. The man who saw himself as a victim had just given his best performance, but tomorrow, the stage would become a gallows. On the 4th day of the trial, the courtroom carried a different air. No longer the loud outrage or heated arguments, but a cold silence, as if everyone was bracing to confront something more unsettling than the crime. The true nature of the criminal. Rachel Monroe began the day by placing a thick, gray-bound file on the table before the jury, carefully sealed. She slowly untied the cord, opening to the first page, revealing a bold title, Psychological Evaluation. Liam Carter, Texas Department of Corrections, Behavioral Analysis Unit. She spoke slowly, her voice clear. Today, the state will show you not only what the defendant did, but who he is, because sometimes the act itself is just the shadow. The darkness lives deeper. Liam sat quietly at the defendant's table, hands clasped, head slightly tilted, eyes following her every move. The faint smile on his lips remained unchanged, a smile that said nothing but was always there, making anyone who saw it want to look away. Rachel nodded to Judge Jenkins. The state calls Dr. Samuel Price, forensic psychologist. Dr. Samuel Price, a man in his 50s with a measured voice, who had served 15 years with the FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit, took the witness stand. He set down his briefcase, put on his glasses, and flipped through a few pages. Rachel approached, beginning her questioning. Dr. Price, you personally evaluated the defendant, correct? Yes. I met with him 5 times during his detention and reviewed his full academic, behavioral, and medical history. And your conclusion? His voice was even, emotionless. The defendant exhibits traits consistent with narcissistic personality disorder, antisocial behavior, and sadistic tendencies. In simpler terms, he's narcissistic, predatory, and emotionless. A faint murmur rippled through the courtroom. Rachel signaled for silence. Please explain further, narcissistic and predatory. What do they mean in this context? Dr. Price nodded. Narcissistic, he believes he's superior to others, that their emotions, fears, or pain exist only to serve him. Predatory, he observes, manipulates, and enjoys causing harm, like a hunter relishing the moment his prey realizes it's trapped. He turned a page. From his teenage years, Carter showed cruel behavior toward animals, killing stray cats, shaving a neighbor's dog, then bragging to friends as if it were a joke. He frequently lied to escape trouble and learned to make others feel guilty in his place. In school, he was intelligent, outwardly charming, but couldn't maintain relationships long-term. He always needed someone to manipulate. Rachel pressed, what about his capacity for remorse? Dr. Price paused, looking at the jury. He doesn't feel guilt, he feels power. The words landed in the stillness, the faint hum of the air conditioner, the only sound. A female juror bowed her head, her hand tightening on her pen. A man beside her sighed, shaking his head slightly. Price continued, his voice growing lower but heavier. When asked about the victim, he didn't say, I'm sorry, or I regret it. He said, she should have stayed. That's the hallmark response of someone with absolute control tendencies, no remorse, only anger at losing possession. Rachel nodded. Thank you, doctor. She looked to the judge. The state rests its witness. Defense attorney David Keene stood for cross-examination. His tone tried to sound gentle, but it couldn't mask his unease. Dr. Price, you say Liam Carter has a personality disorder. That means he's not fully capable of controlling his actions, correct? Dr. Price tilted his head. Wrong. A personality disorder doesn't mean a lack of awareness. He knew what he was doing, and he enjoyed it. Keene took a deep breath. But could he change? With treatment, medication? No, Price replied immediately. Because he doesn't want to change. People like Carter don't believe they're wrong. Liam sat less than 3 meters away, lips pursed in a smile. He glanced at the one-way mirror, where his own reflection stared back, eyes pale and cold. For a moment, he tilted his head, admiring his smile in the glass. The sight made someone in the courtroom shudder. Keene sighed, thanked the witness, and returned to his table. As he sat, Rachel stood, her voice sharp and resolute. He thinks smiling makes him strong, she said, pointing at Liam. It only shows he's empty. The words fell, heavy as an unspoken verdict. Liam looked at Rachel, his smile intact, but his eyes flickered. For the first time since the trial began, they held a trace of true emptiness. In the afternoon, Rachel presented more from the psychological file, a video interview with Liam in detention after his arrest. The large screen lit up. The image appeared, a small room, white walls, a high-angle camera. Liam sat alone, wrists lightly cuffed, hair falling over his forehead. The psychologist's voice in the video sounded, "Do you know why you're here, Liam?" "Because I did what I wanted," he replied. His voice even, eyes unblinking. "And what did you want?" "To make her stay still." The video stopped. The room was silent. Rachel needed no further words. She looked at the screen, its light reflecting on her composed face, then turned it off. As the trial recessed, Karen Foster left the courtroom, supported by friends on both sides. "He doesn't even see her as human," she said through sobs. "Just something he owned." Dillard, standing beside Rachel at the end of the hallway, looked out the glass window. Texas afternoon sunlight cast faint golden streaks on the floor. He said softly, "The jury's done. They've seen what he is." Rachel didn't respond immediately. She gazed through the glass into the courtroom, where Liam still sat, leaning forward, smiling at his reflection in the steel table. The white light split his image, two faces, two smiles, no soul. She exhaled softly, whispering to Dillard, her voice tired but firm. "Tomorrow, we won't need to prove he's guilty. We just need to remind them he's not human." Dillard nodded slightly. They left the room, leaving behind an empty courtroom where the late afternoon light fell on the defendant's chair, still warm, still marked by a smile that hadn't yet faded. On the fifth day of the trial, Austin's sky was heavy with gray clouds, strong wind sweeping through the old stone steps of the Travis County Courthouse, carrying dust and crumpled newspaper scraps. Inside, the air was thick. What remained to be said, or heard, was only the final evidence, the last piece of a crime everyone thought they'd fully seen. But Rachel Monroe knew the jury hadn't yet felt the true voice of the monster. As the trial began, Rachel stood, her voice no longer raised, as in previous days, but lower, calmer, yet chillingly clear. "The state calls Sarah Coleman, one last time." Sarah entered, her face pale, clutching a small USB drive in her coat pocket. She walked slowly to the witness stand, nodded to the judge, and placed the device before Rachel. Rachel asked softly, "Sarah, what did you bring?" Sarah held the microphone with both hands, her voice trembling. "It's a recording. Emily sent it to me, about 2 weeks before she died. She said she wanted to keep it, just in case." The courtroom fell silent. Rachel nodded to the technician, who plugged the device into the courtroom's audio system. The lights dimmed. A faint static crackled, then Emily's voice, thin, breathless, anxious, came through the speakers. "Liam, please, not again. I just need space." A male voice replied, low and dry, needing no amplification to be heard. It was Liam Carter. "You think you can just walk away, Emily? I need time. If you ever walk out," his voice rose hissing through clenched teeth, "I'll make sure you never come back." Then came a gasp, the sound of something falling, and Emily's voice fading. "Liam, you're scaring me." Finally, a door slammed, and silence. The audio stopped, but the silence that followed was heavier than any scream. No one in the room moved. The only sound was a pen dropping from a juror's hand, rolling across the stone floor, its clatter echoing endlessly. At the defendant's table, Liam Carter sat still. But the smile on his lips froze mid-formation. His jaw twitched, his face tightened, as if hearing his own voice from another world, a reflection he couldn't control. He swallowed hard, his eyes darting to Rachel. She stood motionless, hands on the table, her gaze locked on him. "That's you, isn't it, Mr. Carter?" He was silent. Rachel repeated, her voice sharper, cutting through the thick air. "That's your voice threatening her, isn't it?" Liam pressed his lips together, took a deep breath, but didn't answer. The jury watched him, one by one. A woman in the front row wiped a tear. A man leaned back in his chair, exhaling heavily. Rachel stepped closer to the stand, her voice still low and steady. "For weeks, the defense has told you he lost control, that he was broken, emotional, desperate. But that voice you just heard, that wasn't desperation, that was confidence. That was control." She pointed directly at him. "That's not rage, that's ownership." The words rang out, clear enough to echo off the courtroom's high walls. Every eye turned to Liam. Liam tilted his head, trying to summon his smile, but this time, it didn't fully form. His lips trembled, his eyes wavered between defiance and confusion. He smiled, but it was strained, distorted, as if his face no longer obeyed him. Rachel returned to her table, picked up her file, and opened it to the final page of notes, the one she'd saved for this moment. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," she said, looking at each of them, "you've seen his hands, you've heard his words, and now you've heard his voice. The same tone, the same certainty, the same belief that she was his to control." She paused, her gaze sweeping to Emily's mother, weeping silently in the public seating. "This recording doesn't just prove the act, it proves the intent. He planned it, he said it, and he carried it out exactly as promised." She set the file down, stepped back, her voice hoarse but resolute. "He didn't lose control, he defined it." Judge Jenkins surveyed the courtroom, then nodded. "The evidence is admitted." At the defendant's table, Attorney Keene bowed his head, hand on his forehead, knowing that anything he said after this blow would be a hollow echo. The jury was silent, but their eyes on Liam spoke louder than any condemnation. As Sarah left the witness stand, Rachel passed by, gently touching her shoulder. "You did good," she said quietly. Sarah nodded, lips trembling, then left the room with wet eyes. The courtroom was left with a heavy atmosphere, not just emotion, but the stark realization that this case was over. No one doubted anymore. Rachel sat, silent. Dillard, from the back row, looked at Liam. He leaned forward, whispering to her, "He's breaking." Finally, Rachel didn't respond, only looked ahead, where Liam leaned back in his chair, his gaze vacant and distant. His shadow fell on the wall, a silhouette of a man sitting still, but inside, a quiet collapse. For a moment, sunlight from the window caught his face, reflecting off the glass barrier, half light, half dark. He tilted his head, tried to smile again, but his lips only twitched, then relaxed. The smile was gone. When the judge called a recess, Karen Foster stood, clutching her daughter's framed photo. She said nothing, only looked at Liam, her eyes both pained and resolute. He met her gaze, but for the first time, couldn't hold it for more than a few seconds. Rachel left the courtroom, exhaling deeply. Outside, the wind blew fiercely, leaves swirling on the stone steps. Dillard walked beside her, saying softly, "That was it, the final nail." Rachel nodded, her gaze distant, her voice quiet. "Tomorrow, there will be no more smiles." And so it was when the final day of the trial arrived. The smile that had chilled Austin would become the last relic of a soul that had revealed its own verdict. The final morning of the trial opened with an atmosphere thick with anticipation. Like awaiting a storm, the Travis County Courthouse was packed, with lines of people outside since dawn. Inside, white lights illuminated tense faces. Today, after nearly 3 weeks of trial, the jury would deliver its verdict. Rachel Monroe arrived early. She sat in the prosecution's temporary office, a cold coffee cup on the desk. Outside, the first raindrops fell on the glass. In her heart wasn't nervousness, but a weary vigilance, the kind of emotion unique to concluding a journey, where every step treads on someone else's pain. Dillard entered, handing her a brief note. "Jury's deliberating, started at 9:12. 3 hours passed slowly." In the small prosecution room, the clock ticked dryly. In the hallway, the echoing footsteps of reporters, lawyers, police. No one spoke loudly. Even the wind through the door cracks seemed cautious, as if afraid to disrupt the verdict being weighed. 11:58 a.m., the courtroom door opened. A clerk hurried to the bailiff, handing over a small paper. "The jury has reached a verdict." The news spread like a wave. Reporters inside and outside the courthouse readied their cameras. The clicking of dozens of shutters began again. Rachel entered the courtroom, adjusting her jacket, her eyes on the defendant's table. Liam Carter was already seated, hands clasped across his chest. He was still impeccably dressed, hair neat, face bright, and that faint smile, as if it had never left his lips. Judge Harold Jenkins banged his gavel 3 times, his voice clear. Court is in session. Everyone stood. The jury filed in, one by one. None looked at Liam. The foreman, a middle-aged man with silver hair, held a sealed envelope. As he handed it to the judge, the air seemed to freeze. Jenkins opened the envelope, pulled out the paper, his eyes scanning the brief text. Then he nodded, his voice low and firm. On the charge of first-degree murder, how does the jury find the defendant? The foreman stood, his voice ringing through the silent room. Guilty. Guilty of first-degree murder. In that moment, there were no shouts, no applause. Only an invisible gust swept through the room, as if everyone exhaled at once. Liam didn't move. The smile lingered on his lips, but his eyes darkened briefly. He glanced at Rachel, then around the room, where eyes no longer held fear, but silent disgust. Judge Jenkins nodded, then signaled Rachel. "Miss Monroe, you may proceed with the victim's statement." Rachel stood, holding a folded sheet of paper. Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried clearly in the utterly silent room. "This is a letter from Mrs. Karen Foster, the mother of Emily Foster." She asked that it be read to the court. She took a deep breath, unfolded the paper. Her voice trembled slightly, but each word was deliberate, weighty. "You smiled when she begged for life. You smiled when they showed your face on the news. You smiled through this trial. So I hope you smile again, Liam. Smile at these walls. Smile at the iron bars. Smile at the silence that will follow you every night. Because that smile is all you have left, and it will never save you." A wave of emotion crashed through the courtroom. A woman in the public seating sobbed. Sarah Coleman covered her face, choking back tears. Rachel folded the paper, her eyes leaving the final words, her voice soft. "Thank you, Your Honor." Judge Jenkins nodded, then turned to Liam. The ceiling lights cast a glow, reflecting off the cold steel table, white as a blade. He looked directly at the defendant, his voice low and cold, each word heavy as a hammer on metal. "Mr. Carter, you have smiled through this entire trial. You smiled while listening to your own threats, your own cruelty, your own victim's voice. You smiled when her mother cried. Let's see if you can smile now." He paused. All eyes followed. Rachel watched him, not with anger, but with a steadfast silence. The silence of one who knows justice has finally arrived. "The court hereby sentences you to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole." 3 gavel strikes rang out. The sound echoed, filling the room, reaching everyone like a bell sealing the coffin of the smile that once chilled a city. In the first moment after the sentence, Liam sat motionless. The white light from above shone down, grazing his face. The faint smile lingered, but then it faded. Slowly, his lips dropped, his face twitched slightly. His eyes, for the first time, held a flicker of panic. He looked around, as if hoping to find a familiar face, a sympathetic glance, but no one looked back at him anymore. Cameras flashed relentlessly. Each shot captured the only moment when the smile on Liam Carter's lips vanished completely. In the corner, Dillard stood still, watching him through the crowd, his face expressionless. He knew he'd never forget that moment. Liam was cuffed and stood as police led him away. The clank of metal chains echoed through the courthouse hallway. As he passed the public seating, he looked up at Emily's mother one last time. She didn't turn. She only stared toward the judge, her lips moving in a silent prayer. At the door, Liam paused for half a second, turning toward a reporter's lens. He tried to smile, as if by instinct, but his face was only a pale, empty void. The cameras fired, capturing that image, a face drained of light, no longer arrogant, just barren and hollow. That afternoon, the news swept Austin. Every broadcast aired the same photo. Liam Carter escorted to the van, head bowed, lips closed, eyes dark. The ticker below read, "The smiling killer no longer smiles." Rachel sat in her office, watching the small screen airing the news. Dillard stood beside her, arms crossed. He asked, "How do you feel?" She was silent for a moment, then replied, relieved, but not satisfied. Nothing brings her back. She stood, walking to the window. Outside, Austin's sky was clearing after the rain. Sunlight hit the glass, reflecting her image, and in that moment, she recalled her words from the first day. This is not a story about love, it's about control and arrogance. Now, control had been stripped away, and arrogance had crumbled, but the victory of justice was never sweet, only a harsh silence. In the hallway, Karen Foster walked slowly, clutching her daughter's framed photo. Rachel stepped out, gently placing a hand on her shoulder. The two women stood silent for a few seconds, saying nothing. Only the dim afternoon light stretched across the stone floor, and the sound of the courtroom door closing behind them, final as the end of a story. The story of Liam Carter and Emily Foster wasn't just a personal tragedy in Austin, Texas, in 2010. It was a mirror reflecting American society today, where intimate partner violence remains a silent crisis. Details like the threatening texts, "Don't test me." The recorded warning, "If you ever walk out, I'll make sure you never come back." Or Liam's cold smile in the face of justice, don't just describe a disturbed individual. They expose a broader issue, a culture of control, worship of ego, and the silence of victims. In America, 1 in 4 women has experienced violence from a partner or spouse, and many, like Emily, saw the danger coming, but stayed silent out of fear, shame, or the misguided belief that things will be okay. The lesson from this story isn't just for those in similar situations, but for the entire community. When Emily wrote in her diary, he said, "If he can't have me, no one can." It wasn't just the words of a violent individual, it was a warning sign. Society must learn to recognize sooner. If someone says they fear someone close to them, don't stay silent. Don't assume it's just personal. In a country that values individual freedom like the United States, the greatest freedom is the right to be safe in one's own love. And if Liam's story teaches us anything, it's this: evil doesn't always scream. Sometimes it smiles. Silence, indifference, and the belief that it's not my business are what fuel that smile. Justice, as Rachel Monroe understood, can never bring back the lost, but it can save the next person if we listen, intervene, and believe victims' voices before it's too late. If you believe no one deserves to stay silent in the face of violence, subscribe to the channel to join us in telling the stories behind justice and courage. Thank you for being here. See you in the next video, where the light will continue to shine into the dark corners once hidden by false smiles.